And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Festival of Startups. This afternoon session, we are joined by Enterprise Nation, who are going to be talking about why business advice is so important for your business, especially when you're starting a new business. Just want to say thank you to Alex and Josh from NatWest for the session earlier this afternoon. It was great to hear from you both. I hope you guys have been taking advantage of the event and the networking opportunities. I know I've been sitting on a few tables and butting into people's conversations, so I do apologize for that if you're having a private conversation. But, you know, this is the new way of networking now, so there's so many different ways you guys can connect. I would encourage you all to take advantage of the networking opportunities during the sessions. When the sessions are over, I know a couple of people have done some business already, which is fantastic. I've had a lot of people connect with me on LinkedIn as well. So, you know, let's keep this conversation going after the session as well. Guys, I'm sure they're going to be joining you guys on the tables afterwards for anyone that's got any specific questions, wants to have a few one-to-ones with any of the guys that are speaking. So, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Amanda from Enterprise Nation. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning into our session. I'm Amanda Full, Community Manager at Enterprise Nation. For those of you who don't know Enterprise Nation, we are the UK's most active small business support network that exists to help people start and grow their business. We help over 500,000 small businesses each year to access the support, and we do this in a number of ways through our online community platform, where you can find free content, training, events, and you can connect with thousands of small business advisors who can help you start and grow, like the three that you will be hearing from shortly. As you heard at the start, we're going to be talking all about the value of taking business advice throughout your startup journey. And as we know, taking advice from an outside perspective and listening to that can really help clarify things. And we've seen this year, how working with experts has rescued many small businesses who've had to pivot fast to do more online and keep sales coming in. But as we know, it's a big marketplace. And it can be very difficult to understand what advice you might need, who is best to offer this advice, where do you find it, and how do you make the right choice? So hopefully, after hearing from the three experts in this session, you'll have a lot more clarity around that. Just to explain how today is going to work before we get on to introducing our speakers, we are going to have a Q&A, so I'll start off with some questions to our guests. And then that'll be about 35 minutes, and then we'll have around 15 minutes for questions. There is a question box. I'll be looking at that, so please do post your questions. If you have a specific speaker that you'd like to answer that, do mention them, and we'll try and get through as many questions as we can. So I'd like to introduce our speakers now. They're all three members of Enterprise Nation. And this year, they've also been offering free advice to businesses who've been impacted by COVID. Let's each of you have 1 minute to introduce yourselves and explain who you are and how you help small businesses. So if I can start with you, Dan.
Hello, thanks, Amanda. So yeah, my name's Dan Martin. So I'm a freelance small business journalist, content creator and event host. So I've been a business journalist writing about small businesses for 18 years. I originally wanted to do travel journalism. Usually trainee journalists, it's often travel or sport. But I wanted to do travel, but I sort of fell into small business journalism. I did work experience many years ago on a startup website and thought, oh, these startup types are quite interesting characters. So I've been in that sector ever since and worked for various online publications and print publications and small business support organizations. And in fact, until November last year, I was full-time head of content at Enterprise Nation, but then went freelance in 2020. Obviously an interesting year to go freelance. But I then went back to Enterprise Nation on a freelance basis to help with communicating the small business support that the government is still delivering to businesses. But in terms of my freelance side, so I now run a business that helps small business support organisations and small businesses themselves with content and PR. And I also host events, and I also offer advice on how businesses can get themselves in the press by pitching to journalists.
Thank you. Lucy?
Hi, so my name's Lucy. I'm the founder of Flourish Unlimited, and we're the first and only Institute of Enterprise and Entrepreneurs approved academy in the UK that engages solely with female-founded, focused and facilitated businesses. We operate as a social enterprise, which we have a big kind of ethos about proving that you can be a commercial business and still do good. Our main interest, or our main objective really, is to open up the possibilities of self-employment to women who would otherwise never know it was an option, to economic independence, to better life choices, and to improved health and well-being. Myself personally, I'm a fully certified coach and business strategist. I've got an award-winning background in business development. I really don't care to be reminded how many decades that I've been working in this field, having built and sold a previous enterprise, only to then start all over again with Flourish Unlimited. But I love what I do and the people I get to engage with along the way. And it still feels like the biggest compliment when someone else trusts you in helping them to start or scale their business.
Great. Thank you. And Tony?
Hi, I'm Tony. I would like to describe my journey as I started at the top and I've worked my way down to the bottom. So I've been a director of 2 listed IT companies. I've been a director of KPMG Consulting, Deloitte Consulting, and I then jumped right down the other end and started my own business. And I've since bought and sold, started and sold 3 businesses. And then 2 years ago, I set up Smorgasbord with some colleagues because we felt that the smaller businesses were not really being treated very fairly by the rest of the world, and we wanted to sort of democratize the process of allowing them to access the information that they need to get going. So we provide business advice, support. My speciality is funding, but I am a business advisor through and through. I just happen to specialize in funding, but that's because each of us within the company has one speciality, but all of us work together, supporting each other in that. So that's where I'm coming from.
Great. So we've got an excellent panel. Everyone who's kind of lived and breathed the startup world and obviously have started and grown their own businesses. So my first question is for anyone who's not worked with a business advisor and kind of goes right back to that beginning of, okay, maybe I've started my business and I've been doing a lot on my own. What would be the value in working with a business advisor? So again, a lot of free advice out there, a lot of people who think I can do it myself, why should I pay? Tony, can I start with you? Oh.
Yeah, well, we'd already had this discussion ourselves, Amanda, but what was really interesting, I was just saying I was on the Scaleup Institute annual conference this morning, and I also did some work with Grant Thornton about 5 years ago on what they call high growth companies. And just one example that always sticks in my mind from there, and they define the high growth companies the same as the scale up, which is 20% per annum growth over 3 years, because 20% per annum for 3 years. And just one example they looked at was advice about funding. When they went out to get funding, did they take advice or not? 48% of all the high growth companies did take advice, and 2% of the rest of the SME population took advice. So I think there's something there that tells you why is it these really successful companies have actually also gone out and paid for external advice. And I think the reason for that is when we first set up Smorgasbord, if you go on our website, which is smorgasbord.tech, you'll find a blog there where we talked about the 5 barriers to growth. And what we did when we set the company up was we did a survey of all the companies we'd worked with over the last few years, and there were several hundred. And we asked them, sort of, what do you know now that you didn't know then that you think you could pass on to other people? And the first thing they came up with was access to funding. Then it was the ability to find and retain customers. But the third one was access to good advice. And they all came up with this thing that their mantra when they first started was take as much advice as you can as long as it's free. But they said they all began to realize after a while that if you want really good advice, you normally have to pay for it. And people don't bat an eyelid about paying an accountant or a lawyer or an IP expert to go and do something for them. But they seem to think that any other advice should come free of charge. So that's my view on why I think people have sought advice. But if you're just starting out, I would say you can get lots of free advice. Do try and find a mentor. If you use Enterprise Nation's website, you can get hooked up with a mentor. They will provide free advice for you to a limited degree. Things like the startup loan, which I'm an expert in. I've done over 600 startup loans. And again, they provide 12 months free mentoring to all their applicants. So there is free advice out there, but I think you need to consider if it's a really important decision for your business. Are you confident about making that decision on your own? In the same way, would you go and buy and sell your own house? You can buy a book about it, you can do self-conveyancing, but I don't know many people have the confidence that if they get it wrong, can they deal with the consequences? So without wishing to scare people, I think good advice that's reasonably priced is something you should consider if it's an important decision.
Thank you. And I guess just to kind of pick up on that, because I think part of it is also knowing what you need and understanding what stage you're at, or I think even some question is maybe you don't even know where to start. So Lucy, you work with a lot of people around kind of I think you have a structure or a model that you work with your businesses.
Yeah.
And so what's your kind of thoughts on if somebody is kind of at that exploration point?
I think it's very much about, we sort of talk a lot about return on investment from a financial perspective. And I think that sometimes what is forgotten by startups is the actual sort of social return you can get on that as well. So either what you're bringing back to your local business community, or indeed what the impact the advisor can actually have on you. So they can reduce your stress levels, that, essentially you are failing faster, but you're failing forward, and you're doing that quicker than you would if you didn't have that advice there. And that in turn kind of builds that resilience. And I think that's the sort of structure that you mentioned, is we have a very much a resilient structure that we put into any of the small businesses that we work with, because it just leaves you in a better position to deal with the next growth stage as well, because essentially startup is a walk in the park sometimes to when you start sort of dealing and working with Tony around funding and that kind of thing. It can be a minefield. If you've looked at that social impact that a good advisor can have on you, then you really are starting to just give yourself those best foundation.
I guess it's having that third party, somebody from the outside, being able to kind of look at something that you might be stuck inside and not being able to really see what might be the kind of next thing you should be working on, or an obvious path that you might be missing. So in terms of, I guess, there's a breadth of kind of business advice, and just on this session alone, we've got 3 very different types of advisors. What are the kind of things that help someone deciding who they should work with? I think that's probably a big question. Again, I've recognized I need some business advice, and I've gone to maybe Enterprise Nation and I'm looking for an advisor. What are some things that somebody, and I guess also, who do you work with? So Dan, maybe can I turn to you on that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to shop around and find the right person that's right for you, because it is I know it's a cliche, but people working with people, businesses are people, they're not things. So you've got to you might find a real expert and they just might not click. So I think you do need to shop around, and ways to do it is to look for testimonials from other people. So websites like Enterprise Nation allow businesses to rate advisors very specifically with their particular advice, particular testimonials that they provided, and use again Enterprise Nation and others obviously offer the free calls. So that's a really good way to speak to the advisor, obviously not just to get to the free advice, but also to work out their expertise. Are they right for you? So, lots of advisors will offer, 20-minute, 30-minute free consultations as standard, just to work out if it's right. And, startups, like all the people watching today, I'm sure are parts of lots and lots of different networks. So, speak to your fellow startups who are on similar journeys and find out who they've worked with, what advisors have been, good for them. And I think, the best advisors will turn down work essentially if after they spoke to you they've realised they're just not right for your business, but they'll hopefully will then recommend you move on to somebody that is. So I think it's spending a bit of time taking advantage of free consultation calls and relying on your networks and other testimonials.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that, or similar to what Dan said?
Yeah, I'd agree with Dan. I think what you need to ask yourself is, what are you expecting from that advisor and how do you value it? So if you're looking for free support, you're probably not as wide in your choice. But I think the other thing is you often need more than one. So you may have one, you may have a mental well-being advisor and coach. You may have a mentor who's just generally more like a guide. You may have a consultant who you want to roll their sleeves up and do something with you. And you may have more of a sort of a coach along the lines that Lucy talked about. It's unusual when you find one person that can do all of that. So in terms of working out the value that you're prepared to pay for, the way I would give it as an example, I often advise people when we're going out looking and pitching for investors, what we normally say to the investors is, we're pretty confident about what we're doing and we can do all of this without you. Now that may sound like an odd way to start out, but we know that if we do this with you, we're going to do it an awful lot quicker and get there an awful lot faster and make money a lot quicker. So we value your input to a certain extent, but we don't value it to an infinite extent. And that's how we would decide how much we want to value the company at if you're going to buy a stake. I think if you take that approach, again, rather like Lucy said earlier, what is it you're trying to achieve with that coach and how quickly can they get you there compared to if you went on your own or if you went with another advisor. And another simple example of that would be something like Google Ads, which may sound an odd comparison. If I've got clients that are spending £100,000 a week on Google Ads. It might sound crazy, but they're generating £500,000 and £600,000 worth of business. So they think there's a value in spending that money because it gets them there an awful lot quicker. And it is quite simply a value decision. Once you've gone to all the things that Dan mentioned, there's got to be the chemistry. They've got to be able to add value in the areas where you want them to, not where they want to add value. You might want a retail expert and all the person wants to talk to you about is IT systems, so there's not a lot of good for you. But if you think you found the right person, you need all that chemistry and background and then getting good ratings, references, referrals, all that kind of stuff. But I think at the end of the day, when you come to the decision point, it's, can I justify to myself paying this amount of money to this person in order to achieve the result that I'm going to get from them? And a lot of work we do is on a conditional basis. We'll take success fee. So I do things like R&D tax credit. If you don't get the claim, you don't pay us anything. People seem quite happy to do that. So it's how you value that person. That's my best analogy.
And you raised a really good point there around, trying to be as clear as you can about what you're trying to achieve, which a good coach and a good advisor can also help you hone in on that. So often you might come in thinking you know what you're trying to achieve, and they can help you pick up on that. It might be helpful to kind of illustrate how advisors work with a client. So I know that it will vary from business to business and whatever somebody's looking for, but it'd be interesting to hear from Lucy, an example of someone comes to you, because I know we've had this in questions at Enterprise Nation about how do I actually work with a business consultant? Is it do I see them every month? Is it I buy lots of, sessions, or kind of give an example of a typical person you would work with and how that works?
Well, a particular person, obviously, that I would work with, we essentially work with female entrepreneurs. But personally, I like to engage with people who have a bit of an interesting backstory, because we do work as a social enterprise. So we want to be able to engage with people that also have that notion of wanting to make some kind of social impact as well as making money. I'm not saying it's not about the profit, but, I think that when you're asking what you should expect from working with a coach, I think it's about being challenged. I think, you should never feel as though you're being told what to do, because they should respect that it is your business journey, and that even if you want the same outcome as 6 other people, everybody is going to tread a slightly different path according to what your availability is time-wise to spend on that business, what your budget is, and all that kind of thing. So it's probably the toughest question that we ever get asked, is what can we expect? You will see lots of people who have almost sort of off the peg packages. And you will see those people that say, well, I've made $1 million in 6 months and I can show you how to do that now. But you're following their journey, and you're not allowing for, your individuality, for the kind of barriers or issues that happen in your life that mean you can't follow that. So for a coach or a consultant or something, it kind of becomes about communicating as best you can and making sure that they're aware of your circumstances, of your goals and of your objectives. So I'm sure any of, Tony and Dan would agree that you sit and you go through what those objectives are with someone in the first instance, and you are seeing whether they are the right person for you, whether they get you and gel with you, as Dan sort of rightly pointed out, and whether they then are able to come in on budget, and if not, what can they provide you for the budget you have available.
That's really helpful. And I think also a good point there is, depends on your personality. If you are someone who needs someone with a bit more of a stick, or you someone who's more encouraging, I guess that kind of coach but ultimately it's you who's going to be, working through and progressing towards your own goals. Dan, what are your...
Sorry.
No, go for it.
Sorry, I was literally going to say, you can have the best coach or consultant in the world by your side, but if you don't take accountability for taking the action that's required, it's not going to make a blind bit of difference.
There's a good question that's come in, and I think we'll come on to that one in a moment. But I just want to hear from you, Dan, kind of your thoughts on when you work with other small businesses. I guess, again, kind of, because yours is slightly different in the sense that you might be working more strategically, but you might also be delivering specific. But I know that a lot of your work on the strategic. Yeah.
So I'm a little bit different in that I can, write stuff. So for organizations like Enterprise Nation, and I have a client that they provide a service to other businesses, and they need very practical SEO-friendly content for their website that reaches their target audience. So if you've got a need like that, then that's the kind of thing that I would provide. So that would be on a more, you need however many blog posts or however much bit of copy over a certain period of time, and I would, say I charge the X amount for that. But that's the kind of the way I'd work on the sort of content side of it. But more on the consultancy side of it, and helping businesses get into the press by doing it themselves and not necessarily using a PR agency. Then that would be on a more bespoke level as well. But all of it, completely like Lucy said, is it's very important to talk to the business and know who they are, and not just have a package that here are 5 blog posts that will guarantee you will get all the customers you need as X amount. You've got to talk to the business and work out if it's right, and work out if I can write it. I can write about most things, but it might just not be the right kind of thing that I can do. I agree that all of these kind of off the shelf, get rich quick, based on my 5 ways that I made $7 billion in 6 months. It's always a little bit risky to go down those kind of routes. So I work on a similar basis on being personal.
a really germane example we have is we went back to the advisor being able to help you to pick the advisor. So we get a lot of people, their initial reason for coming to us is they want a startup loan, and they want us to help them to go through their application with them, help them write their business plan and their cash flow forecasts. And we always say to them at the very start, we're happy to help you to do it, but we're not going to do it for you. The other beauty of this scheme is they don't have to pay us either. It's a free service provided by the government. Now, some of those people, we will go through that with them. They will not really engage with us at all. They'll answer the questions. We get the loan application through for them, and we never hear from them. And that's because all they wanted from us was to get their loan application through successfully. Whereas a lot of other clients, when we start questioning some of the things in their business plan, it becomes obvious that they don't really understand some of the things they're trying to write about in their plan. And what's often turned out as initial requests to help with funding, we may end up doing a whole digital marketing program for them. We may end up rewriting parts of their content for them. We may end up helping them develop new products. It could go off in any direction because we've got multiple levels of experience within the company. But often they don't come to us for that advice. They come to us just to get them through a startup loan. But it's that interaction, there's some chemistry and trust builds up during that process, because we're seeing some quite sensitive information. We're often looking at their personal bank statements, their credit score, all of these things we have to look at to see if their application is going to be successful or not. So we've built up a level of trust and understanding, and often they'll just say to us, well, could you help me with that? And we will say, yeah, it would cost you this much. But they've already sort of made that decision they want to work with us. But often when they came to us, they didn't come looking for an advisor. They came looking for someone to help them through their loan application. And that's how we get a lot of our clients to keep. So that's quite a good example, I think, of an everyday. And these are normally startup companies. It's called a startup loan for a reason. So often these people have not even started trading yet. They may even be still at the back of a napkin idea. Or they may have been trading for up to 24 months. They're still all called startups. They all come to us initially maybe with that, just help me through this loan application, and then it becomes something much bigger after that. But with a lot of them, it doesn't, because they don't have an expectation of anything more.
Well, like you said, you build that trust early on, you've demonstrated some value, and obviously there's other things that you can kind of guide them through if they're interested. It sounds like by that point, it's clear that it's not something they need or hadn't thought about yet. I think there's a question that's really good, and I think it's all around what we've been talking about, and it's probably we know it's hard to part with money in any terms. I know you broached it at the beginning, Tony, about it's how you value things. And we all probably used to throw away a lot of money as well, and just kind of takeouts and coffees and actually the things that really work towards our goal. Even then, selecting an advisor, it's a big decision. And I'm quite interested in the question that Angel has posed. When talking to a potential advisor, the main barrier for me is that I need to pay them, but that does not guarantee success. So I guess this is kind of that question about if I'm going to contract or work with an advisor, what are some, how can you measure your return on investment? And I know, Lucy, you mentioned at the start, obviously you have to work towards your own success. But what are some things that you help your clients to basically know that they're working towards that success, or you can measure?
They would always define what that success was, because essentially to one person it might be a millionaire, to somebody else it might be just making enough to have a nice holiday once a year or whatever it may look like. So I think it's about them being very clear on, these are what I want return on investment wise. Can you help me achieve this? And then you actually sit down and figure out what the measurement parameters are going to be. So what KPIs are you going to put in place that make sure that the coach or the consultant, the advisor, is doing their, carrying out their duty of care, but that also the business owner is doing theirs and is actually taking some form of action. And I think that's where, in answer to Angel's question about kind of why, you know, can't we pay you as a return on what you actually do, and when we start seeing the success, it becomes very hard to be able to define that. If I went to buy a pair of shoes and I said to whoever the shoemaker was, I will pay you when I've walked in these for the next few months. I'm also a small business, the shoemaker's a small business. It becomes about, where do you stop kind of having those parameters for success, and where do you continue to measure? Does that sort of make sense, you know, in the analogy that I'm very badly trying to describe? It becomes easier, and you wouldn't dream of saying to somebody in Clark's, I'll pay you in 3 months when I check the shoes work.
Yeah, I think the first thing is about being very clear about setting those, you know, benchmarks. And I spoke to some previous coaches, and they said the exact same thing. And it's about you also obviously working those. And if you're not achieving those, or you're not, maybe that is the point where you evaluate, do I have the right coaches? What other things are maybe blocking my progress towards that? But I think, like you said at the very start, kind of setting a realistic goal, but then with a coach, whether that's, I mean, I know we haven't, you mentioned how you work with businesses, but just as a bulk, you know, example, do you work kind of once a month? Are you on a retainer each month? What kind of support can someone kind of rely on working with you throughout that period of time?
It very much varies. So the majority of people will be with me for about 6 months, because I think if they are not at the point where they are ready to fly, they're ready to progress, or they need somebody who is a more in-depth expert in a particular sort of area of business, or whether it be digital, whether it be web dev, whatever it may be, they should be ready to move on and to look at what that next need is.
Yeah. And I guess in a similar way, I guess, Dan, you probably have some very kind of similar examples. If you had a client and you were contracted, obviously, if you read content, that might be, but if you were helping them set a strategy, you would clearly have what the goals are and how you would try and help them achieve those. So again, is that, I suppose, another expectation of working with an advisor like yourself, how you would measure their success or their kind of return on investment?
Yeah, definitely. So like Lucy says, you've got to set that, and you've got to, you know, the advisor needs to know what you want to achieve at the start, because if you don't, there's all sorts of dodgy conversations that have to happen if you know, there's been a lot of misunderstanding. So obviously, if I'm providing an actual bit of content, so, you know, set amount of content a month, that's a little bit easier to measure, because the person comes to me and said, I need this amount of content because I'm looking to do this, and I need that content to deliver this for me. So whether it's, you know, bringing people to the website or raising brand awareness, and obviously that would be reviewed on a monthly basis. And if it isn't working, and then, you know, that's something we can review. And the same from a content strategy side, you know, having a conversation about what it is the business wants to achieve from their content. If it's them putting it in place, doing it themselves, then it would be, you know, monthly reviews to check whether it's working. So it's just about, you know, communication and making sure it's working on both sides. But I love the analogy of the shoes. I think you're right. But again, what Tony said as well about people sometimes think they can get business advice for free because there is so much free stuff out of there, but they wouldn't walk into Sainsbury's and walk out with a tin of beans. I'm going to use beans instead of shoes. So yeah, I think, but so, you know, it's got to be some good communication on both sides, and knowing why you're in it, and the client themselves being very open about exactly what it is that, you know, they want to achieve to make sure the advisor delivers.
I think the other thing that's really important is it depends on the nature of the work. So as I said, we do some work that is purely conditional, like an R&D tax claim, applying for Innovate UK grants. We'll say it will take a percentage of whatever we get, and that's a risk we take as well as you. But what I find, we're using the example of the shoes that Lucy referred to earlier, there's a lot of clients out there who are working on that basis. that we take 100% of all the risk and they take none. And they wonder why it is we don't all jump at the chance to work with them. So if you were the cobbler in Lucy's example, you see that proposition slightly differently to the way the client sees it. And there are lots of people out there who will abuse that privilege, even if you were crazy enough to offer it to them. So what we do with people is we will agree exactly the terms we're going to work under. And that could be as simple as just using the SMART analogy when we're setting those objectives. So but we would write it down. We'll send it by email to each other, saying this is what we've agreed. So we'll go through the S, the M, the A, the R, the T. And then we'll say it's going to cost you X pounds per month, or it's going to cost you whatever. But we never, ever ask anyone to sign a contract. And that is quite unusual. I spent half my life writing IT contracts that were impossible for people to get out of. But it didn't take long when I moved into sales to realise an unhappy customer is not a good customer. So being able to say to a customer, aha, well, although you don't like it, you can't get out of it because you've signed a contract. That's a really silly position to be in, from my point of view. And it's a very nasty position to be in if you happen to be the customer. So we say to people, look, try it, pay the first month, whatever it is. But if you think this really isn't working, first of all, you don't have to pay any more. And B, if you can justify to us why you really think that, we'll give you your money back. There's no point in us keeping your couple of £100 or whatever it is, just because we can. We'd much rather that we agreed to say we don't agree on this, and to show there's no hard feeling, here's your money back. Because normally we're not out of pocket in terms of expense. We may have wasted a lot of time that they're not going to pay us for, but it's not as though we have to go and buy in materials or fly halfway around the world or whatever it might be. We haven't normally incurred an out-of-pocket expense. We have foregone some income that we could have earned if we'd worked for someone else during that time. But if you want to build trust, I think being open right from the start. So we just said to people, we don't have contracts. We will send you an email saying this is what you will do, this is what you won't do, and this is what we will do, and this is what we won't do. And from then on, we just agree as we go along.
That's really helpful. And I guess any other thoughts on just some tips and advice to anyone who's thinking, I don't want to get ripped off, or how do I make sure that when I work with an advisor, I've asked the right questions, there's no hidden fees. What are some things must be aware of or be conscious of? I guess, any thoughts, maybe Lucy, on that question?
Yeah, I think we always, I know what Tony's saying about not having contracts. We set up service level agreements, and we're very clear that it's a two-way thing. We need this from you, you need this from us. And one of the things that we always would offer any client before they actually started with us is the opportunity to speak to any of our current or previous clients, because I think sometimes you feel then more open and more able to ask the pertinent questions and the questions that you really kind of deep down want the answers to, but maybe don't feel as though you can ask them directly of the business advisor. So that's something that we offer as standard. And if an advisor doesn't have anything to hide, then they should be perfectly fine in you having those kinds of conversations. And I would always, always advise that.
That reminds me a lot of, before you go and join a new company, speak to people who work there, not just looking at what's on their website. Yeah. And Dan raised earlier, look at reviews. And if you can speak to those people, if they seem like others who are similar on a similar journey, and then if they can't help you, then I think all of you are very important, and you will know others who might be connect them to the right consultant for them. So I think those are all really good points. Something that's picked up Tony's, it's more of a statement, I think, the difference between a consultant and a mentor. And I think, in terms of what results you can expect from them. I know, Tony, you mentioned it very briefly that there's all different types of, you might have a coach, a consultant, and a mentor. We didn't really touch on that, what the difference might be. I don't know who wants to take that, just to give an example.
Yeah, it can be somewhat pedantic, particularly between coach, consultant, whatever. But I think the real big one is a mentor. And all the mentoring training I've ever done, we start off with the mentor. There is not a coach or a consultant or whatever, or a contractor or a subcontractor. You know, the mentor thing, I really do like to keep quite different. It's often someone that is just there as that sounding board, that sanity check, someone with a bit more experience, someone who's not involved day to day with all the firefighting that you're doing. And you know, they say it's lonely at the top when you're running your own business. If you've got a lot of staff, who do you turn to just say, am I going crazy, or should this happen? Now, if you've got a partner, that may be possible to talk to them, but often they won't have a clue what you're talking about if they've never run a business or whatever. They may listen very sympathetically and not have a clue how to answer. So the mentor, just being able to talk to someone and say, I've had this idea about this. Is it completely mad, or should I look at it again? And so they play this sort of role of almost like kindly uncle or auntie, sometimes without being ageist. Just being another ear to air your problems with. They'll often have experience they can bring and put you in touch with other people, but they're not there to do things for you. One of the things I like saying is, as a mentor, if you come to me with a question, I will never give you the answer. If you come to me with a question and 3 answers, I'll help you pick which of the 3 is correct. That to me is the difference between a mentor and any of the other roles. If you come to me as a consultant or coach and say, what's the best way for me to do this? I will normally try and say, what have you done already? But the danger is we just jump in and say, oh, here's the solution. So I prefer to adopt that sort of mentoring approach first, to say, okay, let's have a chat about what you've already done. When did this problem start? What have you done about it so far? Who else have you talked to? Who else in the company can you rely on? And then help them to come up with some solutions, one of which may be that we do something for them. But I'd much rather help them to go through the possibilities. And the analogy I always use, because I do it every day, is funding. So a lot of people come to us. I mean, I get almost every day coming to me saying, I want a startup loan. And my first question is, are you actually trading or not? And if they say yes, I say, do you know what a bounce back loan is? And they go, yeah. So we'll go for one of those first, because they're a lot cheaper, they're a lot quicker, you can get more money. And a lot of them are quite surprised, because I don't do anything with bounce back loans. It's an online process, as some of you may know. But our job is to put the client in the direction of what is best for them, not what's best for me. I say, if you still need some more money, or you don't succeed with the bounce back loan, or you don't get enough, come back and we'll do a startup loan with you. But go and look at that one first, because it's the cheapest, the quickest, and the easiest option in terms of repayments. You've got up to 10 years to repay. You don't pay anything at all for the first year. The government pays the interest for the first year. So I would be really not acting in your best interest if I just start you applying for a startup loan. Now, if you come to me and say we've only been trading a few months, you can't get a bounce back loan. So I'm not going to put you down that route. But it's about helping the client to find the best solution for them. And the other thing with funding, often people come to us and say, I need a loan. And we'll say, well, what do you want? How much do you want, and what do you want it for? And often they don't need a loan. Something like leasing, invoice financing, merchant cash advances, all of these things are possibilities that they have never even considered, because they don't know that marketplace, that landscape. That's why you go to an expert, in my view. That initial advice you get free of charge. But it's still talking to an expert for that reason. In the same way as you've got a mortgage, you go to a mortgage broker, not to a pub. I wouldn't go to a lawyer for a mortgage. I'd go to a mortgage broker, because that's what they do for a living. And I would rely on them to be able to give me good options. But
I think there's definitely, so there's definitely a difference between obviously what you get from a mentor, working, contracting with one, and back to it's another Tony's point. In my view, and maybe everyone, I don't know if everyone agrees, I don't see mentors as someone you pay. I've never come across paying for a mentor. So there's a difference there, definitely, in terms of, and I think going back to what you said, Lucy, you know, if you're working with someone, you have a two-way expectation, and in turn, they'll expect you to kind of, but I think it's very different when you pay someone. There's a, that relationship.
We always
So any other
really simply, sorry, Amanda, I think there's a delay and I'm just cutting over the top of you talking, apologies. We always just simply say a coach or consultant is business performance, and a mentor essentially is your personal development, your sounding board, exactly as Tony had said. But you've got to make sure that if you're in a mentor relationship, you kind of have a mentor that it might change every now and again, so that you don't just become sitting and having coffee with somebody moaning about things on a regular basis. Whereas that coach consultant, more advisor would keep it fresh and make sure you were keeping you moving.
Yeah, the only I'd add to that is, if you look at the role of a non-executive director that I do for 4 or 5 clients, that is effectively a paid mentoring role, I think. But
you have unusual. A lot more responsibilities legally and such like within any kind of NED role, than you do just sitting and having coffee and being a sounding board for somebody though. So, yeah.
And mentors can come in all shapes and sizes, and again, one of the things that we always encourage, obviously, is if you need expert help in something, then obviously go to an expert. But by all means, especially when you're kind of growing in your journey, I'm sure all of you have mentors yourselves. Dan, maybe you have some mentors.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I think it's like you said. It's generally, I would say, you wouldn't be paying, and it's often, a lot of very experienced entrepreneurs that have been there, done it, sold up, made a lot of success, will then do a lot of mentoring on the side. So it's finding, if you can find someone that's been in your space and is maybe a lot more successful, you can have a chat with. So we've had an Enterprise Nation event a couple of years ago. In fact, we had a coffee brand who met the founder of a successful coffee brand. I'm not going to name who they are, but they met who had grown a coffee business, and he ended up talking to her after speaking. She ended up mentoring him with his brand, and as a result of that, he got into Sainsbury's. So that was a sort of chance meeting, and she saw herself in him. I remember what it was like when I was there. So that's often a sort of mentor-mentee relationship. It's someone that's been there and can just listen, and like Tony and Lucy have said, not necessarily tell you what to do, but just act as a sounding board on, the decisions you need to make.
I think it sounds like could potentially open up opportunities as well. So I think, interestingly, that's what a NED does as well. Someone who can you hire a NED to help increase opportunities. Any other questions from?
I don't actually have a mentor. Sorry, obviously I don't have a mentor. No, but I've got lots of people that act partly as mentors for me. Now, they could be my co-directors, they can be business partners, they can be clients sometimes. Now, I might say to a client, you know an awful lot about this. Tell me, explain this thing to me. How do we do this? And a client might come back and give me that advice. So I think it's about just being open and trusting with people and asking them questions. They don't have to have a hat on that says mentor, or one that says coach, or one that says whatever. And we seem to have lost Amanda somewhere, but hopefully we can keep going. So yeah, it's I think particularly when you're starting out, it's good to have a formal sort of mentor, but use everyone around you, your friends, even your friends down the pub or whatever it might be. If you're in a co-working space, talk to one of your co-workers, another company. One of the real beauties, I've worked in a number of WeWork buildings. I've got a client who's in that same business called X Venture. And one of the biggest benefits their clients get is the fact that the whole building is full of other people in a similar position to them, but they're all different. So, someone may be 2 steps ahead of you in the journey, enough for you to go and ask them. And it's like there's ahead of someone in the manual, and ask them that question. And that's what people like, similar position. they've all done similar, and they can help each other out. So they act as each other's mentors in a way, but it's still good to have that formal relationship. Well, I don't mean formal in terms of legal, but someone outside that is your final go-to person, where you do see once a month or whatever arrangement it is. But use every possible source of help you can find, whether it's just Google or whether it's talking to other people in a similar position. Being a member of things like Enterprise Nation, local Chamber of Commerce, FSB is one. I'm a massive fan of, the Federation of Small Businesses. They're all things where you can meet like-minded people who are a bit ahead of the game, and that's enough for you to get that information from. And in some ways, they may be the ideal person to talk to because they've only just done it 3 months ago or 6 months ago. They didn't do it 20 years ago or 10 years ago. They've literally just done it, and so they're fairly up to date with all the trials and tribulations. So don't just think of these remote figures who are a lot more experienced than you. So have you lost you, Amanda? You're back again.
Oh, yeah. And I would just want to say that's an excellent summary of the session. Obviously, take advice where you can and try and network, and I think find a mentor. But then I hope you take on board all of the points that we raised earlier about, finding value and when it's right to take, work with an expert, but then all the things to kind of think about to make sure you find the right person, you've got the right, they're going to help you achieve the goals, you're certain of your goals. And again, on Enterprise Nation, I think there was a question at the very start, how many experts are in Enterprise Nation? We have about 8,000 advisors from all kinds of backgrounds. So please do visit. We also have tons of free advice. So don't go to Google, go to Enterprise Nation. Oh, we can't hear you.
Lucy, Dan and I are the three best. Sorry, I said Lucy, Dan and I are the three best advisors that you have, though.
Yes.
Oh, of course. I was waiting.
Goes without saying, you don't need to search anymore.
we are Google.
Brilliant, fantastic. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tony. Some really interesting points you made there, especially in terms of, talking about the importance of actually getting the right professional advice. This whole idea of buddying with people. I think people don't really see mentoring as important, but they're actually doing it, especially, peer-to-peer mentoring, where you've got someone that you can rely on, that you ring up maybe once a week, twice a week, and you set yourself goals and you get that person to sort of challenge you on those goals and make sure that you're actually fulfilling the promises you've made to yourself and within your business. So some really key nuggets there that you've sort of given individuals in terms of what they should be doing. Having your business partners hold you accountable. It's really important that when you are running a business, that you've got those accountability partners in place, especially as a startup, and especially if you're starting a business on your own, it can be quite a lonely place. So thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate your time today. For those of you watching, check out Enterprise Nation. There's so much content out there. These guys do amazing work, and we're really proud to have them on board as one of our partners. Before I go and we end this session, I'd just like to remind you all that some of the guys will be staying, so they'll be joining some of the tables to have chats. If you guys want one-to-ones, do feel free to get involved in the networking, get involved in the live chat. You've just been told networking is so important. Going to events and meeting people is crucial. So we want you to take advantage of this, as part of the Festival of Startups. Log in regularly every day and, get involved in what's happening, make connections. I've had fantastic conversations already today with a number of different people who, of all different skill sets. So you can learn from other people on this journey. So really take advantage of that. And also, before I go, We've got another fantastic session, last session of the day, and this is from a gentleman all the way over in the States. We've got Brendan Kane, who is a 1 million follower. He's got 1 million followers, best-selling author, and likes to think outside the box. And he built a platform for Taylor Swift and Rihanna. You know, and he's going to be telling us all about that. So please join my colleague Alex for that fantastic session, which will be starting in just half an hour. That's enough time to get your tea ready, sit down, and you know, if you've got no other plans, get involved in the networking. So once again, thank you, Amanda, thank you, Lucy, thank you, Dan, thank you, Tony, and hopefully we can all catch up again soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a nice evening.